Huh. 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 Hello, welcome to In Good Company. You might be wondering what we were doing there. Well, in this episode, you will find out. I've got Allie Actual Shackleton with me. Hello.
Hello, Dan.
How are you?
Very good. Thanks for having me in the studio today.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for joining me. So today's episode, we're going to have a look back at some of our highlights over the past 10 or so episodes.
The last 6 months.
Last 6 months. So we've got some clips to share with you, and we'll get straight into that. So yes, the first one was one of our more recent episodes featuring David Pope. So we'll play that clip to you now.
This is what I get people to do if they are about to step onto a stage. If they're speaking at a conference, they're giving a TED talk, whatever. I get them to get put their fingers here. Mm-hmm. They breathe in and they go like this. They go, huh, huh, huh. Right? Have a go.
Huh.
Huh.
Huh. Yep.
I can see your fingers are starting to go in and out. That means to me that you've engaged the diaphragm. When some people do this exercise, they'll go, right? We don't want that. So if you want to engage the voice immediately, lower the pitch, and have that strong dynamic voice on the get-go, it's huh, huh. And then it's, good afternoon, everybody. My name is David. It's great to see you all here today. Thank you so much for inviting me. You can hear the difference, right?
Firstly, I think we committed. I think we did well.
We did.
I don't think we were too soft on that approach.
Definitely not.
Do you feel different as a result?
Well, we are definitely not doing all the things that David recommended.
No, that was one tip. And we weren't stood up.
Yeah. So his podcast was all about the leadership voice.
Yeah.
And he recommended lots of different things there. There was practical top tips, like that short exercise he took us through. There were also bigger conversations in there about, what is required for a leadership voice and what we all kind of take as, from our leaders and what we want to hear in order to kind of put our trust in them, to believe in their authenticity. So it was a really good episode. And as you kind of said at the beginning of that episode, it was a topic we hadn't ever covered in over 50 episodes. And yet everyone has a voice.
Yeah.
And it's not something that we think about a lot. So
no, it's true. He talked about how nervousness can affect how your voice comes out, and how we and particularly took a particular focus on looking at the way that we present ourselves virtually, as well as that was kind of, he was talking there about getting people ready for TED Talks and big conferences and things like that. But really in the general day-to-day, we find in the modern world, we find ourselves so much in front of laptops, in front of webcams, in front of screens on Zoom and Teams and things. And yet the voice from leaders who we're looking to is as important there as it is on a stage in front of hundreds of people.
Absolutely. And that's a very different skill to being able to stand on a stage. I think a lot of David's tips were relevant for both, but particularly, like you say, we're always interacting now virtually. It's very rare that we're in the same room together. And so those different ways to think about your presence and how you come across on screen versus in person, the things that maybe we think we take for granted now, but actually when you listen to David's podcast and stop and listen about your pacing and your volume and the delivery and your facial expressions, even simple things like having a camera on or off just makes such a huge difference. So
it does.
It was a great episode. I really enjoyed it.
And he addressed that as well. He addressed that, talking the camera presence as much as just the voice. So it's about your physical appearance on screen, on camera, looking into the lens versus looking down at the screen at people, and how all these subtle changes, paying attention to lighting and background and all that kind of things, and how paying attention to these subtle details can make a massive difference to how people resonate with you and what you say. So yeah, it was a really insightful episode, I thought.
It was.
And fun as well. And he's a good character. He was a good a good person to talk to.
He was great. As BBC trained vocal coach, he has his own business based in Asia. He came across brilliantly, as you would expect. Very easy to listen to, definitely worth a rewatch.
Yeah, absolutely. Who's next? Who's next on our list?
Who's next? Well, this is one of your picks, Dan.
Oh, yes.
Sarmista Mondol.
Yep.
From IBM.
Yep. Well, she was talking all about AI and compassionate leadership. And what was interesting about that is that obviously being from a tech company, she's pro AI. I think there's still the jury's out about how it's used, I think is very important. But we'll get more into that in a minute. So let's play the clip and then, we'll have a look we'll have a chat.
Here we go.
What, if any, cultural shifts do you think that organizations need to make to successfully adapt to and adopt AI?
First step for an organization is to start the journey. The AI, the automation, the Gen AI journey, that's important. Because if you don't today, somebody is going to disrupt you tomorrow. Empowering and enabling your entire organizations, your employees to understand that, hey, this is good for you. So what we do at IBM, when we work with clients who are interested in starting the journey, we help them with short, smaller pilots so they can actually experience the technology and see how it actually works for them. So I think this is the cultural shift we are looking at, is really starting the journey, but also helping your organization at large be in this journey with you.
I think AI is a massive topic at the moment, and we're covering in quite a few episodes. In fact, I would go as far as to say is almost all of our episodes feature AI in some way, shape, or form. And I think what's crucial for us, and what I think we're picking up on as a company, is AI is a big disruptor in the world of work, and how we as human beings respond to it, manage it, use it, whether consider the ethics of AI, and looking to the future of it. We're in a quite a pivotal moment, really. And I was interested to find out more about what Sarmista was talking about when it came to the connection between AI and compassionate leadership, because compassionate leadership talks to a lot of human traits, human characteristics and styles, and AI doesn't as much, I don't think. And so, it was interesting. It was really interesting having that conversation to find out that balance. And I think that we, as I say, we really need to be looking a lot at human skills and soft skills and human leadership in the future to coexist with AI, if we're to not just completely give in to AI and losing out on jobs. I think that's quite crucial.
Yeah, definitely. On paper, like talking about adopting AI and then having compassionate leadership, we were like, how is this episode actually going to play out? But she really brought it all together. And, we hear a lot about AI is not going to take your job, but somebody who knows how to use AI will take your job. And I think, we're having conversations internally around this. And does that still stand? And, Sarmista was really like, you've got to see AI as a collaborator. And if you aren't ready as an individual or organization to start and explore that, then somebody else will come and, what you're trying to do will be disrupted. But then how to do that in a way that works not only like for your organization, but for the different multi-generations within that organization was something else that she kind of really picked up on. Yeah,
and multi-generational leadership's always been a challenge to really understand the wants and needs of everybody that works of all generations that work in your organization. And I think that's only going to get more challenging, I would say, with AI as well. And it's going to kind of separate out more between the extremes, I guess.
Yeah.
Or maybe it'll do the flip. Maybe it'll completely who's to say, really? Ultimately, though, there is still, this is what I was going back to earlier, is that if you focus on the human element and not the AI element as much, you've got to have an awareness of AI and you've got to have an understanding of AI.
Yeah.
But fundamentally, if you focus on the human element, then organizations will continue to thrive with their people.
Yes. Which leads us so neatly.
What a tangent.
As if you'd planned
Not
it.
Tangent.
That's the normal
An
for you.
excellent segue, yeah.
On to our next guest, who kind of picked out 3 of the topics that we could talk about all day at Impact. So leadership, change, and people. And that was Allie Ferrara, or she was Ali La Vista when we started this.
When we recorded,
yeah. So since married, congratulations to Ali, who works at Danone, based in the US. She's a huge advocate for human-centered leadership.
Yeah.
And the work that she is leading at Danone was so aligned with Impact. But also the difference is there. It was just a really interesting conversation. And the energy that Ali brought to this podcast is truly infectious.
Yeah, definitely.
Shall we watch it?
Yeah, let's watch the clip, yeah. I happen to know that you're an advocate for human-centered leadership.
Yes.
What does that mean to you? Why is it crucial in today's workplace?
Human-centered leadership for me, I mean, you know, it is what it is. It is what it says. It puts people at the center, as you could have guessed. But it's really about the leadership practice of it and the kind of genuine intention around it. And so for me, being a human-centered leader really means having that genuine intention to help each person succeed and kind of find their own fulfillment at work. And really creating an environment where employees can thrive and they can kind of be their best selves and unlock really their full potential.
I think what resonated with me for that, I mean, obviously we're slightly, I guess, biased because, you know, it says it on that board behind us that we are a human company. So it really aligned with all of the work that we do.
Yeah.
And I think, as I've already mentioned, we talk about human-centered leadership has to be the future of leadership in order so that we have organizations that people can actually work in
and want to work in.
I think that's crucial to the future of work. And I think so there were so many things that were aligned with the way that both Danone clearly and Impact think. Which made for a really nice and easy conversation for us. And as you say, Ali's energy was infectious and clearly passionate about this world. What else did you get from that episode that stuck out for you?
So many things, Dan. I think there was there was quite a few red threads throughout the episode. She talked a lot about trust and how, you know, for organizations, for individuals to follow leaders, you know, you've got to have that trust, but also a lot about change. And I think then that, you know, the conversation we've just had about AI is going to be a huge disruptor, whichever way you look at it. But how do you bring people along with you for change? Ali had 3 or 4 different acronyms that she used throughout, but one of them was WIFI, what's in it for me? WIFM, is that? Yes, there we go.
What's in it for me? I'd forgotten about that. Yeah.
So it was at the start of her episode. So yeah, what's in it for me? And although that sounds quite I guess mercenary perhaps for individuals in an organization, it's actually, you know, like we say at Impact, organizations don't change. The people in the organization have got to want that change for it to come through. And so as a leader, it's that kind of pointing out, you know, what is in it for the individual, and you know, what is that then purpose of being at work, and you know, how does that tie through not just from what the organization is trying to achieve, but for their well-being and for their development, and for there were so many different things throughout that episode. Ali was so open and sharing some you know, really interesting thoughts from, you know, a huge organization. I just
and I think that's again a key part of it is that there are huge organizations out there, and to focus on human-centered in huge organizations is a challenge, and it is difficult, especially when, as you've said, change is because change is always a constant. That's been said before, but the pace of change changes all the time. And it only seems to get faster. Particularly as with technological advances, with sort of geopolitical challenges and things like that. It's so having that human-centered approach going, that we're all in this together, and bringing in a lot of those sort of human soft skills, leadership skills that are essential for human-centered leadership to work, then that's going to ultimately give you a better chance for success navigating through challenging situations and change.
And I think, Ali again was honest that no organization that she's been part of has got it all right. But if you're not trying, then you're never going to get it right. So like with Sarmista, like you've got to start the journey to seeing what AI can do. For Ali, it was the same. You have to start that journey to be more human centric, because everything else will fall from that. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, a good episode. Who is next?
So then we went to another topic that we hadn't ever covered in any depth. And for me, this was one that was really educational. Lots of things that Steve Hill said just opened my eyes to things that I had a vague kind of knowledge of, but nothing in any depth. And it was all around neurodiversity. So shall we watch the first clip?
Yes, please. What are the most common challenges that neurodiverse and neurodivergent employees face?
And the biggest blocker is actually getting into the workplace in the first instance. I mean, the latest ONS figures suggest that in the case of autistic adults, only 29% are in full-time employment, and that includes the underemployed. So, it's a bit of a sobering statistic, not to dwell on the negative, and that's what we're trying to, impact in our very modest way. But however ambitious we are, and of course, we are very ambitious in terms of the evangelization and helping organizations to really do what we do. But we understand that true scale is really about teaching and helping our organizations to do what we do. And we see ourselves really as a proof of concept to be able to do that.
So for me, that episode was a really fascinating one because, it felt like, I learned a lot, for one thing, from Steve, because there's so many things that unless you do give it that headspace, or if you're part of a particular world, or if it's part of your day to day, it is easy for things to kind of pass you by. And so even for example, neurodiversity is a phrase we hear a lot. But he was sort of saying earlier on in the episode about how in effect everyone is neurodiverse in some way. It's about neurodivergence that's more specific to people with diagnosed conditions. But it's also, as he was mentioning in that clip, about the challenges that neurodivergent people can face within a workplace, and that might even just be getting a job in the first place. And so it was jam-packed full of learning for me, which was really, really interesting. And I think one of the things that we talked a lot, even in just this recap episode, about human soft skills, and one that stuck out for me was kind of more empathy, and curiosity, and finding out more about people, as much as is appropriate, but finding out more about people, finding out more about the challenges that they face is I think crucial for leaders, and a really valuable lesson there. Just what Steve, if you haven't watched the episode or don't know, he works for an organization called Auticon, who employ virtually their entire workforce is neurodivergent people, and it's a fascinating thing, which I urge you to go and have a look at.
Absolutely.
Fascinating work that they do.
Yeah. Yeah. No, Steve was great. And like you say, really educational for kind of one of the first things is the term neurodiversity only really came about in like 1998.
Right.
So you think a lot of people were already in the workplace by then. You know, organizations are like hugely established. So kind of here we are 25 years later. In the scheme of some workplaces, that's not a long time to kind of adapt to this new language, and then how do we do things differently? And another of the things that Steve talked about was not putting all of this like on the leaders of the organization to be their problem to sort out, but how, you know, pockets of individuals, we're all leaders in organizations, and how, you know, you can kind of through kind of employee groups and things is to sort of start bringing things to awareness. And that's not just for like, you know, that wasn't just then for necessarily neurodiversity, but for any other kind of like marginalized groups. So yeah, I think there was something there for me in that, you know, there is the power of the individual within an organization can really do a lot to effect change.
Definitely. Yeah, there was a lot of learning from that episode, and one that I even need to go back to, I think, more.
Yeah, that's a definite listen again.
Absolutely. We're our last. Are we our last one?
Well, I snuck an extra one.
You did sneak an extra one in. Well, I know for a fact that the next one is a really interesting one, and probably should come with a slight warning, I think, because there are some details in there that some people might find a bit difficult. So watch with a little bit of discretion. But this is Dr. Alia Bojilova talking about her experience as being taken hostage and navigating her way out of that. So let's play the clip.
In May 2013, myself and two of my colleagues were taken hostage in Syria.
Wow.
And we were taken hostage unarmed by over 38 heavily armed militia members. When they took us, they stated to us that the intent was to make a bad video of us. And in spite of the initial threat and conviction in what they communicated, the short is, we managed to talk our way out of our predicament.
Wow.
What really did save us was the ability to suspend our assumption for a hot second and to try and understand our adversary's perspective. You know, these individuals that started off as potentially our worst ever adversaries suddenly became a fellow human once we connected with them, once we engaged in an element of curiosity and allowed ourselves to see whether you can feel differently about this same situation. Is there something, what can I learn about this moment in time, even if it's your final moment? How can I engage with it differently?
That's obviously a very short clip of a much longer one, but since that recording, I've had the privilege of meeting Alia in person on a program that we both worked on, and she's even more wonderful than when we met her and recorded her on that podcast. She's a fascinating human being. She's got so many stories to tell, so many insights, and despite, I would imagine that most people, or if it was anyone else that has been taken hostage, they'd probably not be anywhere near as cheerful as she is. She's just got that real energetic and zestful approach for life that is just infectious. But obviously we talked a lot about her work and curiosity and how she brings that to she spent a lot of time in the military, still connected to the military, based in New Zealand. And she's written a book all around curiosity and resilience, and those particular skills got her out of a very difficult situation just by being curious. And again, we've talked about this so much in this episode about that human connection, that essentially that was what got her out, the ability to empathize, the ability to talk to these people that were essentially going to do very nasty things. They were probably following orders. They were probably, they're doing their job, as it were. And in actual fact, you know, they were be able to talk on a one-to-one on a human level where it's like, do you really want to, you know, and asking probably about their own families and if it was them, and doesn't bear thinking about what they probably the details of that, but what she obviously learned from that, she's been able to reapply and putting to be able to share that with other people as well, on her farm, and sadly not disrupted by goats, which she was worried about. I was hoping there'd be goats walking about, which she kind of promised, but no goats there were.
Yeah, she was great, and like you say, Dan, you know, when I listened to that bit of her podcast back, like I just get goosebumps, you know, the way she tells the story. But actually, another you know, the way that she talks about curiosity and she talks about resilience, she's so humble. So obviously she's had these life experiences that most of us could never dream of, will certainly never be anywhere near that situation. But she also talks about the resilience that's needed, and I think she uses the phrase the daily grind, and I think we can all really relate to the daily grind. You know, you don't have to have been in such an extreme situation to need resilience. And, you know, there's a lot of talk of resilience is about bouncing back. And, you know, she kind of says that's, you know, you're not necessarily wanting to bounce back to where you started from in times where you need to show your own resilience. And, you know, she kind of had 5 points to talk through and some real practical tips, and you know, the way that you unpacked that with her during that episode just made it so relatable for anybody listening, that aside from, you know, her wonderful like way of presenting and warmth and the stories that she had to tell, there were some real like tangible takeaways.
Definitely.
And,
well, she talks more about that in her book, and she talks about the ABCD of resilience. I need to get that right, probably.
Yes.
We'll make sure it's in the description, probably. But yeah, the ABCD.
This is not edited.
No. We'll make sure the links to her books in the description. But yeah, no, she was just, and when I met her, obviously there was just it was like we were mates already. It was great, and she a very impressive shoe collection.
Okay.
Which not that that makes any difference to her personality, but
she's always good to know.
Well, yeah, we had another episode on resilience as well, with Roy, and it was an interesting pickup there. There's a fine line, I think, between, because building resilience shouldn't necessarily mean that you can just, you know, be a punching bag and just be able to come out the other side of it. I think that there's a big part of that is being, which you know full well of, like just being able to kind of say no to things, and also noting and potentially taking an active leadership to kind of stand up and go, there's a system that needs changing here. If there's a point where everybody's just having to be resilient because of the crap that's thrown at them, then maybe something needs to change, and that's where taking active leadership to kind of stand up and sort of find some courage and talk up against that is maybe a good approach. But yeah, I really enjoyed Alia's episode, and would urge, if you haven't watched it, to if you're only going to watch one episode out of this, that would be a good one. That would be a good one to watch for sure. Now, you said that you snuck in an extra episode.
I did sneak in an extra episode.
What is your sneaky episode?
My sneaky sneak. So we're going to take a short break for the summer from our regular podcasts, and we are going to replace those with our summer season of podcasts, which are all with our Impact colleagues from around the world, and have all been created exclusively for the Leadership Playbook.
Yes. The Impact Leadership Playbook is something we've just released this year, 2025, and it's been worked on, again, by multiple people from around the Impact world, really kind of bringing to life and consolidating all of our thoughts around leadership and the future of useful hacks, useful tips and tricks that you can implement straight away. It's experiential, which is important to us and the work that we do. And this is one of 14 episodes that were recorded for the playbook. Snippets of which you will find in the playbook itself. So why don't we take a look at this episode?
You have to be prepared to learn with agility, and that requires the learning mindset. It's really important that as a leader, you have the ability to identify what gaps in knowledge and skills and capabilities there may be, and really think through how to close those gaps quickly and intentionally. And that all has to happen in the flow of work, because nobody has time to take a time out and go and have an offsite to discuss the strategy for it all. You really have to develop it into your practice of how you lead and how you work. So it's a really important competency that all successful leaders will need to rely on, and currently even now do need to rely on. But I believe that it's sort of increasingly true as we move into moments that are just riddled with disruption.
Stephen.
So it was hard to pick. It was hard to pick an episode because we have 14 colleagues who all very clearly and beautifully articulated either like a topic around leadership or a context in which leadership is required. But we picked Stephen. He's our global practice lead, and he is the co-editor of the playbook, along with our most esteemed and wonderful colleague, Dr. Molly Shrimpton. So that was our nod to Stephen, and to say thank you for all the hard work that you've done on pulling the playbook together with Molly. Yeah,
it was great. It was a lovely process as well to for me personally to connect with colleagues that I haven't connected with properly for a good while. Going through that process and talking all about, as you said, all kind of aspects of leadership, or as many as we could fit in. So let's have a quick chat about some of the other episodes that maybe featured there. What other ones stuck out for you that maybe people might want to go and watch as they get published?
That is a really tricky question. And I think, like in that clip there of Stephen, he's saying that, there are so many different aspects to leadership that you can have as strengths or like development areas for yourself. And some of them we're probably not even aware of. So, we've got talking about curiosity, about courage, about self-awareness, and then more practical things around coaching, collaboration. There's, I don't know where to start, Dan. You've put me on the spot.
I have, you're right. And maybe the best thing to do then is for people to kind of go out and find it for themselves. They will be published gradually on our YouTube channel and Spotify. But if you want to access them early, you can do by accessing the playbook itself. And the way to do that, find the link in the description of wherever you find this episode, and you'll be able to go and explore the playbook for yourself. I feel like that's a nice way to wrap up. Would you?
Well done us.
Well done us. So in that case then, that just leaves me to thank Allie for joining me today on this wrap-up episode of In Good Company. And as we've said, if you'd like to find the playbook and go and explore that for yourself, or if you'd like to find out more about Impact and the work that we do, or of course, if you'd like to connect with us on LinkedIn, then please find all of the links that you need in the description of where you found today's episode. Thank you one final time to Allie. Thank you.
Thank you.
And until the next time, take care. Ta-da!
Ta-da!
Huh.